You know, the story we're diving into today, it's one of the greatest stories ever told. And it's not just about some historical figure. It's about us, all of us. It's the incredible, epic journey of our very first ancestors as they walked out of Africa and eventually covered the entire planet. So let's get into it, right from the beginning. I want you to really think about this for a second. What would it take, what would have to happen for you to leave the only home you've ever known? I mean, just pack up and walk away into a totally unknown world. No map, no GPS, no idea what's out there. It's a huge thing to consider, right? Well, for our ancestors, this wasn't really a choice. It was something they had to do. And this wasn't because of a war or some political drama. Nope. They were being pushed by a force way bigger than that. The planet itself was changing right under their feet. So what was this big change? Well, the trigger for this whole thing was a massive environmental shift that we call the Great Freeze. And when I say the world got cold, I mean it got really, really cold. So, starting way back, about 1.6 million years ago, the Earth plunged into what we call the Ice Ages. And you've got to understand, these weren't just extra long winters. We're talking about incredibly long periods of deep, deep freeze, where huge sheets of ice, some of them miles thick, just started crawling across the continents. And just to put the timeline in perspective for you, the last Great Ice Age only ended about 10,000 years ago. That might sound like a long time, but in the grand scheme of human history, it's pretty recent. So for most of our early existence, this frozen world, that was just normal life. Okay, so here's where things get really interesting. Think about it. If all that water is being pulled out of the oceans and frozen into these gigantic ice sheets on land, where does that leave the oceans? Well, the sea levels drop. A lot. And this exposed huge new stretches of land that used to be at the bottom of the sea. And suddenly, this created the perfect solution to what seemed like an impossible problem. How do you cross an ocean without a boat? Well, now you didn't have to. You could just walk. These new strips of land, which we call land bridges, basically became natural highways. And they weren't just for humans. Animals used them too, and our ancestors were right behind them. So, this stage was set. The highways were open. And our ancestors started to move. Let's actually trace those footsteps and see where they went. Okay, so where did it all start? All the evidence we have points to one place for modern humans, East Africa. This is our starting line. And about 100,000 years ago, that's when the first great journey out began. Their first steps took them out of Africa and into Southwest Asia, what we call the Middle East today. And from there, they kind of fanned out. Some groups headed east, spreading across southern Asia. Other groups turned north and started that long, tough journey into Europe. Now, this next part is just mind-blowing. By 40,000 years ago, humans made it to Australia. And even with those lower sea levels, there was still a big chunk of open ocean in the way. So reaching Australia meant they had figured out how to cross the sea. That's a massive leap in thinking and technology, one that we're still trying to piece together today. Just take a look at this timeline. This wasn't some quick road trip, right? We're talking about a journey that unfolded over tens of thousands of years. Think about that. Generation after generation, each one pushing just a little bit further into the unknown. Until finally, about 12,000 years ago, we hit the last major landmasses, the Americas. But, just getting there, that was only half the battle. Because arriving in a new place is one thing. Actually surviving there is something else entirely. So how on earth did they adapt to all these brand new and often really harsh environments? I mean, think about the challenges they faced. These were worlds that were totally alien to their original home in Africa. We're talking about brutal, icy climates, plants they'd never seen before. Were they food or were they poison? And huge, strange animals like woolly mammoths. To survive, there was only one path forward: adapt or die. Okay, so problem number one, the cold. Fire was obviously a huge deal, but you can't exactly wrap yourself in a campfire to stay warm while you're hunting. The solution was brilliant. They learned how to process and sew animal skins together, creating essentially a portable shelter you could wear, the very first clothing. And their idea of shelter evolved right along with them. At first, it was simple. Find a cave, get out of the wind. But then they started building their own.
It started with simple things, like digging pits and covering them with roofs of branches. But over time, they built more and more advanced structures, using wood, stone, and, get this, in some places they even used massive mammoth bones as the frame for their homes. Incredible.
And all of this led to an absolute explosion of new technology. They weren't just scraping by anymore, they were true innovators, creating a whole new toolkit to master this new world. This period has a name, of course. We call it the Mesolithic Era, or the Middle Stone Age. And the big thing that defines it is that the tools got smaller, more complex, and way more specialized. You didn't just have one all-purpose rock anymore. You had specific tools for specific jobs.
And wow, what a toolkit it was. We're talking about hooks and fishing spears to pull food from rivers and coasts, the bow and arrow. I mean, that was a total game changer for hunting, making it safer and way more effective. They even figured out how to hollow out logs to make canoes, which opened up rivers and coastlines like never before. And maybe one of the biggest leaps of all, they domesticated dogs. They didn't just have a tool, they had a partner.
Now, it's really important to remember that we're still figuring all of this out. This story is constantly being updated. Take the Americas, for instance. For a long, long time, the main theory was that people crossed that land bridge from Asia and walked down an ice-free path inland following big game. But new evidence is pointing to another really cool possibility. Maybe they came by boat following the coastline.
Yeah, there's this great quote from an archaeologist, James Dixon, that really paints a picture. He said, "There's no reason people couldn't have come along the coast, skirting the glaciers just the way recreational kayakers do today." How cool is that? Instead of this brutal march through ice, picture them hopping down the coast in small boats, feasting on all the rich sea life. It's a great reminder that history isn't set in stone. It's a living story that we're constantly learning more about.
So when you boil it all down, from the first sewn clothes to the invention of the bow and arrow to building canoes to cross the sea, this entire incredible 100,000-year story really hinges on one single crucial human trait: our amazing ability to adapt. And, that leaves us with a pretty big question for today. Our ancestors faced a changing planet, a world of ice, and they found a way to adapt. Well, today, we're facing our own rapidly changing planet. So the question isn't just about them anymore. It's about us. How are we going to adapt?